Yo, 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 what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back again giving you that Infinity Kingdom goodness. Today, we're going to be touching on KvK. And more specifically, what I want to talk about a little bit is some strategies, right? I think it's very important to sometimes cover these things in somewhat of a broad in kind of vague way where, we're not necessarily kind of going into, I would say, extremely deep details as far as organizational things, but I wanted to start off kind of in a broad sense of, right, what do you do if you are winning? What do you do if you're kind of at a stalemate, right? What do you do if you're kind of in our position, right, for KvK Group 10? And we'll talk about a little bit about as far as kind of how we got here, right? Where you're kind of on the lower end, right? Where you basically don't really have any territory, so to speak. And we'll kind of go into some details on why that happened along with where we are. So I can give you at least some kind of good objective points on where you may be able to, I would say, either mimic or just try and relate to, depending on the situation and or position you may be in. Of course, as always, before we get started, make sure you guys sub, like, of course, ring that notification bell. And if you want to be a part of our conversation, you can join our Discord, which you can find in the description or in the pinned comment below. Okay, so let me just kind of give a little bit of a background here. So again, our KvK group is number 10, and this includes 73 all the way up to 80. Right now, you can see here some of the starting positions where we have so I guess just starting from 73, right? So you got 73, or we'll just go 1 and kind of go there, right? So we're here at 1, 73, we got 75, 80, 78, 77, 74, and then 76. Now, as we've talked about before, right, the current ally groups are 79, 1, number 4, 80, number 6, 77, and then next to us, 76. So that means you have 7, 74, 78, 75, and 73. That are together. Now, the collective power for these, right, is about a 300 mil difference. So we're at about 1.23 billion for our group, and they're at about 1.53 billion. So again, it's not an extreme amount, but just to give you some figures here when it comes to active alliances, along with the power of those active alliances, is that our server as, oh gosh, I gotta go back to number 10 now. Our server as 79, right? We are collectively, right? We have the most active alliances, and along with that, right, the most overall active power out of all the servers, as far as in our KvK group. Right now, it's not an amazing amount above 74 and 78, right? But they kind of fall into the number 2 and number 3, and then you have 75 and 73 respectively falling into the 4 or 5 position, not necessarily in that order. And then you have at the bottom 3, right, which is our allies that we would have, right, being 80, 77, and 76. And so because of that, with the situation that we're in now, right, where initially what happened is we had, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this, right, going into like a KvK1, if you've played other Kingdom Builders, you know that for sometimes the first seasons of your KvK or your SVS, you may know or have you either know what the groups are going to be, so you know the other kingdoms or servers that are going to be in your group, or you just have a really good idea. In this situation, right, based on patch notes that came out in 1.7, right, specifically they said that there would be some manual picking to make group adjustments as close, even, right, and as fair as possible, right? That was some of the wording along there, even though we had a pretty good indication that it was going to be groups of 8. We just didn't know if it was exactly going to be a 73 through 80 situation, or if there might have been some adjustments made. Again, this is based on the patch notes and also by what the IK team from some of their operations people had stated as well. So, right, we're going off of not necessarily making any allies, right? We had a few servers that reached out to 79 about wanting to be allies, but, one of the things I always told people is that, we want to wait until we see specifically, right? I think there's 2 important things here. One, I think it's very important that you wait to see exactly what the groups are going to be. And hopefully going forward into future KvKs, right, starting from Season 1, that it's going to end up turning out to be that and then continue to be more of that, right, where you're not going to know exactly the servers that you're going to get matched up against. And this will allow for kind of everyone diplomatically to be on a nice even playing field, right, where no one necessarily kind of is making, too early or too late of agreements, but everyone has an equal opportunity to do it at the same time. But because of this, we ended up having some of the other coalition servers where they reached out to others, again, kind of eventually being what we now know as 78, 74, 73, and 75, right, had kind of reached out weeks before and already had a union coming in to KvK, right, which is completely fine, right? We understand. Our choice was to wait until we got a confirmation, like I said, one, on the specific servers that are going to be in the group, and then number two, which I think is sometimes overlooked, positioning. I think positioning is very important when you are looking at who you may consider allying with to an extent, because sometimes this can create 2v1, 3v1, 1v1 matchups, right? Especially if you're able to hold your own and you think you have an advantage against a side server. It can allow for other servers to give their attention to the opposite side to help another ally. Maybe if you're in a middle position, like the 1, 3, 5, and 7s, you can choose to assist an ally, overtake, either 1v2 a situation. Maybe one-on-one, right, where one kind of goes here. If you're 7, you go in here, right? So again, it gives you options on what you can do. But if you kind of already pre-form your coalition too early, sometimes those options can be taken away from you. And so again, for some of those reasons above others, right, we waited until the groups were officially announced, and then we started reaching out to servers. At this time, of course, everything was just already set. So, the other 3 allies, we just figured, we have to make the best of the situation. Right, so we reached out, ended up forming our coalition, and I'll be honest, I'm actually really happy with the group that we have. I will say this, right, above all else, it has been a pleasure working with 77, 76, and 80 so far. Right, one of the first things that we initially did was kind of set up a Discord server for the group. We invited leaders and officers in which we vetted and kind of gated access for to prove that they were who they were, right, via screenshots of the sort. And, we've had a couple voice meetings. We have channel updates set up. It's actually a very, I would say, organized operation. I think there's always room for improvements, but I really like at least the foundation level of structure that we kind of set up, with, I would argue and say, short notice. It has been just a fantastic time talking with some of these people, meeting them, building some relationships and some rapport, and it really has just been a pleasure. So I have been myself, I think, happy. I think our leadership and our officer team in 79, for those that have attended the meetings and have been there and have met some of these others, right, would say the same. But now let's kind of get to where we're at now, right, which is fast forwarding to the map, right? Like, how did we get here? So as most of you know, right, in the trial season, you ended up having the Zone 1 adjacent gates, ended up opening early, or I should say first, right? So we'll zoom in on these, right? And I'll just kind of focus on the 79 side, right? So that would be our 3 gates here, 3 gates to the left. Now, given that the majority of these gates have already opened, right? And actually, even if you look at it now, I think there's only a few more, or excuse me, I guess some of these haven't even been taken yet. I guess it's, oh, interesting. I guess it's the ones that have the green underline on it that haven't. For some reason, I was looking at the color coding going different. But anyways, so, right, what I'll say here is, right, the reason why you see the map, right, is basically kind of their faction winning as far as territory goes, right, and I would say kind of just general momentum at the current moment. So there's a few things here, right, that I look at. One, what some people may not know is that, right, in our other 3, right, servers, being kind of the bottom 3, right, at least out of our 8 that we have total, right, didn't necessarily have the most, or right, in a lot of overall activity, right, along with a large player base that they're able. Now, some of them kind of varying depending on the time of day, but at least if you're comparing them, right, kind of tick for tat on the next 3 or next 4 servers above them, right, those ones which are a part of the other coalition have a little bit more overall activity. So like I said, one of the things is that we kind of got, we essentially, had to work together based on who was left, right, because of the early diplomacy. So we didn't really have, really only had one viable option at that point. which is either we don't work together or we do. So I guess technically two options you can go with. But of course, we opted for what I feel was the better overall one. And then because of that, right now we're in the situation where we have to kind of do the best that we can. The challenge is that because, right, 79 with us, kind of having a little bit more opportunity to do things just based on overall power and activity, right, the other three servers just quickly got overtaken. Right, even though they still have an active base, they have active players that are still putting up a fight, which is fantastic to see, right? And I can only commend them for that. Right, our server was the only one that was actually able to, for the most part, right, just push out. We were able to push west into 73. We took over all the territory, and we even grabbed the gate going up to 75. In short, what ended up happening is 75 ended up coming down to 73, and we were fighting a 1v2 on the west, right? Even though we were able to take all the cities, we had a fantastic kind of 4 or 5 hour run initially, and then towards the end of that, we ended up having 74 come east. Right, they basically took a gate, had a bunch of people poured over to these gates, didn't really even worry about 76 for the most part, and then we ended up getting flanked and pretty much fighting a 1v3 for the duration, which is kind of now turned into a 1v2/1v4 at any given time. Even though, of course, some of their players are still in our allies' zone 1s, a lot of their focus so far has been on 79, which is understandably so. Again, just kind of given, we're the most active overall of the servers coming in and strongest just by a little bit compared to 74 and 80, at least when kind of doing a one-on-one comparison. So with that, that kind of shapes how everything happened with the servers getting overrun. But now I want to briefly just talk about a little on, what do you do in this situation, right? So kind of looking at it from both ends, right? You're kind of winning. Right, when you look at the opposition from the enemy union, or I should say the other union, right, and they kind of have this, pretty clamped control of their zone 1, right, or I should say of the entire zone 1. But then what do we do, right? What are your options when you're kind of pushed against the wall, right? And I think of, initially I think there's a few things. I think one, the whole Gnome City, right, if you're looking at the capital here, right, of Ymir, there's a lot of unknowns, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not difficult to take a Zone 2 gate, right, if you're just focusing on trying to take one to get into Zone 2. So I don't think taking the gates is difficult, right? You could push everyone into Zone 2, hang out in Zone 2, keep fighting. Eventually, when the Zone 3 gates open, you try and take a Zone 3 gate, then everyone just keeps pushing in. Like, that's pretty standard, I think. I think other options are possibly maybe spreading out in a few different Zone 1s. Maybe you try and take some adjacent gates into some of the other Zone 2s and take those. All right, so I think there's probably I'd say 3 to 4 viable options that you can do, whether you're trying to spread out or you're consolidating into possibly one zone. I'm always iffy on the consolidation because I personally feel that there's kind of a right time and a wrong time to do it. I think when you look at consolidating, just naturally, you are giving your opponents less fronts that they have to fight on, which means they don't have to multitask as much, right? They don't have to spread their forces out as much to have assistance, right? And I would say presence in multiple areas where you're kind of expanding what they have to do, right? When you kind of herd yourself, like my expression I like to use with our group is kind of herding yourself like cattle, right, into like one zone or the other, especially when you're going up against, what at this point, right, is just an uphill battle for us, or I should say for our union, right, it just makes it, I feel like it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like it does help condense your activity, but at the same time, right, you could have the other union just send all their strongest players to that one, and then, they're just basically able to farm all the activity because they don't have to go far and search for it, right? So it's less work they have to do to get kind of better return on their investment. So it's interesting to see what is kind of happening now. It almost seems like a general consensus amongst, it looks like almost all the servers, right, is that everyone is kind of just basically trying to get to Zone 2, right, in some way, shape, or form, as the adjacent gates are going to open first, and then you'll end up having the Zone 3 gates that will open. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at Zone 3, if it's just going to be kind of like an all-out free-for-all, and maybe everyone will just kind of have fun there. Maybe, some of the unions and kind of allyships will still hold up. Again, there's just a lot of unknowns, right? Because KvK is kind of always like a real-time developing situation. But what I will say so far is I have at least been enjoying KvK. I know many of our members have been enjoying just doing a lot of PvP, right? A lot of honor farming, and just really kind of getting their PvP fills in. I think one of the things is that, sometimes it's good to try and look at, what can you take away, right? Regardless if you're on like the overwhelmingly winning side, if you guys are still kind of in this stalemate, or if you're just kind of on the constant uphill side, right, where you're relatively losing, if you just want to use simple words for that, right? What can you take away, right? What's the area either of improvement? What are good things to look at, right? I think a very good sense of where a server is how you can come away from the wins and the losses, if you again just want to simplify it to a W or an L, and how can you kind of grow from that? What can you take away, and then can you still motivate your players and your server to where you don't just crumble? The one thing I will say is to always bear in mind this is a trial season, right? This is a test season, right? Along with some of the gate bugs we've been seeing, right? Them opening up the Zone 1 adjacent gates first, which is kind of, such a wild idea, right, when you think about it. And it's funny because I have had a little bit of time to think about it, and I am somewhat 50-50 on it. I'm going to make a separate video kind of talking about what I feel are like the pros and cons and some feedback specifically for KvK. But I want to say that I'm not 100% sold either way. It is just interesting when I look at how things are playing out, right? How things could have been different, maybe more of a fair fight, right? Because for us, that was the hope. I even talked about this in previous videos. We wanted to come into KvK with a fair fight, right? We wanted to try and have like a fun, fair, kind of even 4v4 where the power was really close and we were able to kind of, keep going at it, right, for a while. To me, that would have been really fun. And that was always my hope initially. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't always work out, right? We might have hopes, but, other servers, you can always have servers that, they just want to wreck face on other servers, right? They just want to overwhelmingly win. They'll just take the strongest servers, doesn't matter, even if they fight the weakest, and it's like an easy breezy, beautiful cover girl victory. So I just always find it interesting to kind of see how certain servers act, right? How they play things out. I think it's good, too, and I will say this is kind of a last note. This is kind of a pro tip I'll give, is it's good to take notes on servers, right? Because you want to know how leadership or the current leadership acts, how they respond, how they communicate, how they engage, choices they make, decisions, right? Are they the types of servers that just want the easy victory? Are they servers that like the uphill battle? Maybe they fight from, kind of the underdog position. Maybe they like to have an even 4v4. Maybe some servers don't want to ally with too many people. Maybe they'll only ally with 2 or 3. All right, these like little notes, I would say, are really good to take care of, remembering and jotting down somewhere so you can use those for future KvKs, because you never know when you're going to see another server again, right? Having good connections, getting contacts with the diplomacy reps is always good as well, right? Keep kind of a little book on that, because again, you never know when you're going to want to reach out to someone, and sometimes just having a contact, someone that you can talk to and engage with when and if these things come back up around, are really good to have, right? Better earlier than later, or I'm going to stick with that, earlier than later. That's it from me. I would love to know from any of you guys, right? What do you think about anything I talked about here? Are you experiencing anything similar in your KvK? And if so, right, what are some things that you guys are considering doing as well? Even if you don't go into the most extreme amount of detail, I would still love to know. Let me know down there in the comments. That's it for me. Until next time, we'll catch y'all later.